All right, good evening, everyone. Today is September 26th at 7 o'clock. We have all 9 members of the Warrant Committee present. So we have a quorum. We will start our meeting. And the first order of business is, we'll disclose that this meeting is getting recorded for everybody to share later on. And it's really the first agenda item is to introduce new members. And that is, we have Deb here and Emily. I thought we'd all just kind of go around and introduce ourselves and then give them a chance to tell us about themselves. So, why don't you start? Steve Callahan, 33 Perzini Drive. Been in Medfield for almost 30 years now. Have 2 kids through the school system. I spent my professional career in public accounting, CPA, and spent 40 years in public accounting. So I recently retired a couple of years ago, and last year became the co-chair along with this gentleman here for the committee. So I've been on the committee for a couple of years, or a little over 2 years. Yeah.
Feels like 20.
Yeah, it feels like in dog years, it feels like 20. But
Bob Sliney, I've been on the Warrant Committee. It's been fifth year. It's been very interesting, and always happy to see new faces and new perspectives. Been in town almost 30 years as well. From top of Pine Street on Overfield Drive, and most recently, I retired so long ago, I can't remember what I did, but I think I was at EMC for about 20 years and other finance and operations positions prior to that. So good to see everybody back together.
I'll go next. Jill Proctor, 16L. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for joining us. Third year, I think starting third year on the board, but Steve and I started at the same time.
that's 3 already.
We're on 3. I got 2 little ones, going through Medfield school, 6-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. I work for a community bank, and I run their project management office.
Ed Rosella, 65 Wood End Lane. I've been in Medfield since 1980, so I think I'm the senior person in terms of longevity. I've been on the committee for, I think this is starting my 5th year. Dog years. And I had 3 children, all that went through the Medfield school systems, greatest schools. Did it make the top 25? I was looking at the report today.
Depends which one you look at.
Yeah.
There's 3 different ones.
16 in US News and World Reports.
Good, yeah.
Not that I'm checking.
We'll pick that one. And I spent my career in accounting and finance as controller on a number of different companies.
So I'm Brent Elson, Tallwood Drive, before that, Dale Street. This is my 2nd year on the committee. I am a physics professor at Northeastern, the associate dean of College of Science, and I got 3 kids, 2, 11, 1, 9, and I have to pass this over to you folks.
Hi, I'm Pete Michelson. I live on Nebo Street. I'm starting my 2nd year on the Warrant Committee, and I'm enjoying it. I retired a couple of years ago. I was an attorney for my professional career, and I have 2 daughters who also went through the Medfield public school system, and I also like the school system a lot. And I moved here in '86, so Ed is right. He's the champion on that.
Hi, I'm Emily McCabe. I'm on 2 Metacomet Street. I actually just moved to Medfield 2 years ago, but my husband grew up in Medfield. He actually moved to Medfield in 2nd grade, and my oldest moved to Medfield in 2nd grade. And there's a cute story about that, because when we moved here, she asked him if he thought his second grade teacher would still be there. And he thought, oh no, she long passed away. And like the first week of school, she came home and said there was a assembly for Mrs. Carey, who had her 50th year, and then in fact was his second grade teacher. So it was just a cute, like, little repeat of history. And so anyway, I decided to join the Warrant Committee because when I moved to Medfield, I have a very easy commute to the high school. So I've gone to all the town meetings and I've just been like very inspired by the people volunteering their time for the town. So I'm honored that I can do that as well. I do have 3 kids in the school system, 9, 7, and 5. So we just started kindergarten with the youngest. And we're loving it so far. And then professionally, I am a veterinarian and I've been working in Walpole for 7 years. It was a second career for me, but I won't bore you with my previous career, so. That's it.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Mather Eldred, I'm on Grand Street in Medfield. I've been in Medfield resident 5 years. I have a 7-year-old and a 1-year-old boy, so we're well into the school system. Professionally, I work in real estate in the Cambridge area. I manage some real estate for MIT and grew up in Walpole and just happy to be starting my 3rd year.
I'm Deb Cardiser, and it's my first meeting. I've been in Medfield for 18 years and have 2 kids that have come up through the school system. Well, one's still in, she's 15, and the other is 21. And both made great use of the schools, so it's a matter near and dear to my heart. And really happy to join the Warrant Committee. My personal career has been in personal finance. I'm a wealth advisor, so I know everything financial on the individual side. And it's a pleasure to be able to come and help the town and serve and give back.
Well, welcome to you too, and we're looking forward to, being part of the committee and deliberating all these important matters before town meeting. No, we have a rule here that no question is a dumb question. So feel free to, I'm still asking questions. So, it's there's a lot to sort of to get a grasp around. So feel free to ask any question at any time, and we'll do our best to answer it.
I just want to make one comment yet. I know that normally at the first meeting, Scott McDermott, as the town moderator, who's, I guess, responsible for each of us being here, normally makes the statement, but he had a business meeting tonight. But I just wanted to recognize the work that Scott's done in terms of formulating the committee that's here, because if you look at it geographically and demographically, the skills that has come together, I think the time in the town, etc., and some of the background really is reflects the work that he did. He puts a lot of time into it. It's not something that he does with very seriously. So I think each one of you have had the opportunity to meet with Scott, and most of what he told you is true. The one that said the one he gave you on time is not, but we've all but again, just we're very fortunate to have his work, and you all reflect that.
Great. Okay, the next agenda item is the approval of the July 11th, 2023 minutes. Mather did send those around. I know our 2 new members were not at that meeting, so you feel free to abstain from the vote, but entertain a motion. So any comments on the minutes or anything that
You did a nice job. And I would recommend, I'd move to approve the minutes of July 11th as submitted.
second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I had to abstain.
You're abstaining, okay. You do want to abstain, okay. So that passes 6-3. Okay. All right, the next order of items is the calendar for 2023, 2024, and meeting minute assignments. These are preliminary calendar dates that we've put in the count. These are Calendar's always a tricky thing because we have to alternate with the select board on Tuesdays. So the finance team is here with us. And we also have some elections that are, we have a local election and national primaries and stuff like that. So this was the best suggested times, for us. It's mostly Tuesdays. There are a couple Mondays, a few Mondays that are after there. But the tentative dates are there, and sort of preliminary topics are listed. And I also put in the minute responsibility for that meeting. We rotate alphabetically, and Mather did the last one alphabetically. It would be Emily, but because you're new, I moved you back in the queue. So Peter, you're on for this meeting, okay?
I just put, very sorry.
So just continue with the alphabetical order, unless someone wants to volunteer to do minutes for every meeting, happy to do that too. Okay. But so the next, the agenda, you've seen the agenda for today, but, and we'll talk about the budget process and what the proposed process is going to be this year. But the next meeting is going to be as you'll see, the timing of when we look at things has changed quite a bit this year from prior years. So we're going to look at free cash, some general revenue and general fixed cost budgets, and try to finalize some preliminary guidance. And then in October and November, we're going to dedicate our time to capital budget reviews and get those taken care of and squared away. And then we picked 2 dates in January to schedule all the town departments. And so what we hope is that we get all of those town departments, in that time frame. So when you're meeting with your town departments, and we can talk about that in a minute, but when you're meeting with town departments, keep these dates in mind. We'll work with Christine to try to make sure that, we get all the departments in on those 2 dates. That's the plan. And then on February 13th would be the school. And then that would leave us, March, the end of February, and then March for warrant articles. The public hearing would be April 2nd, and the town meeting is May 6th. So that's kind of now this is all subject to change, but this is sort of an initial pass at what we thought would be a good schedule. Any questions by anybody on that? Or?
Yeah, does that, I'm sure you guys obviously talked, but will the departments be ready for us to talk, kind of December timeframe if we wanted to hit January? Okay, they're ready.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
yes, they'll be ready.
Okay.
There's going to be, they may not have final, budgets for you, but you should certainly reach out and
Sure.
meet with them and find out what's going on.
They'll be thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
In the past, we've used kind of Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving, it's time to contact.
Yes, we'll be done by the end of October, so they'll be ready.
Oh, great, okay. Well, last year we were waiting, I think, to see what was gonna come in from state funding. I believe that's what it was last year. It came in kind of late.
Oh, the state.
State aid.
Yeah, because with the transition to the new governor, she did not submit her budget until she was actually required to submit her budget. Yeah.
We expect that to be
We expect
sooner
it to
this
be
year.
sooner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I hate to be, although I seem to be in the role as a contrarian. With more than
That's okay,
anybody would
Peter.
like, but the 2 hearings for all the town, I mean, my memory is that last year, they wanted to build a new garage at the Council on Aging.
Okay, let me correct that. Those two meetings in January are for the budget. Only, non-financial or, for the operating budgets of the town departments. Other articles,
Okay.
we would dedicate, additional time to, so.
Christine,
That's really just to go through the
when will the
operations.
article-
of the department, Okay,
When do the articles,
What's our date?
We have mid-January.
Yeah,
mid-January? So that's when we'll know how many articles there are to it.
yeah.
yeah, they see the meeting at the end of February, March, those are the dates when we would go through other non-operating budget town department articles, so. Okay,
And Peter, to your point, the March 19th date, as you said, is if needed, is if there are articles
Yeah,
that
we-
require more public input and discussion.
yeah,
Where you use the word require that get it whether they're required or not, but yeah, okay.
Should be enough time. If we get a person, yeah.
I think so.
yeah, that's the hope, and I think when we go through this process, you'll have a better appreciation of the timeline. So this is the process just for the financial articles, primarily the capital budget and in the operating budget. So, I mean, this slide really just covers some basic principles that I felt like we just we have new members, and just as a reminder, we start out with an assumption that we're doing level services in the operating budget that's consistent with the need. So if there's no need there's no need for a level service. But we also have to address capital needs, funding of long-term liabilities, adhere to our financial policies, and always we're looking for continuous improvement in any operational efficiencies that you identify. And we have to look at the levels of our stabilization funds and reserve accounts. So when we say comprehensive sustainable budgets, that's comprehensive is addressing all these areas. Sustainable is staying within our Prop 2.5 revenue, guidelines. And if we have issues with that, there's a process to deal with that, but we start out with something that's, assumption is that's sustainable within our revenue generating ability. This is a slide from the spring that basically says the same thing, but it's very much a balancing act, putting all of these needs of the town into financial articles and reviewing priorities and needs and balancing it all against the tax impact and staying within Prop 2.5 framework. So the actual process, this slide really just covers everything except the operating budget. Okay, and this is sort of what we're going to do first. We're flipping kind of the order of things. Under that planning section, looking at actuals from last year, looking at the preliminary amounts of free cash. We know they're not certified yet, and that'll come later. But Andrew's done a great job of closing the books, and he'll have an estimate for us that would be good enough to look at and plan with. And then we'll look at balances in our stabilization fund and the reserve funds. That's really, what they're gonna be working on. They've been working on, and they're gonna get all this together for us for that October meeting. We'll look at, then in the middle, we'll look at guidelines for what we think those stabilization funds should be at, what level do we need in them? And what level should be in the reserve. We have a general stabilization fund, and we've been building that up. But the question is, well, what's the right level for that fund? And how do we know when we've achieved that? So looking at the purpose of all these stabilization funds, what's the level of funding we want to get to or where we're at, and then establishing some priorities around the allocation of free cash. So we have some policies around free cash, and every year we have excess above the required, policy amounts. And we do, put forth articles to spend that money. It's always, so the 24 town meeting will be spending free cash that we just generated from FY 23. And so, agreeing on those priorities and then sort of making sure that the town proposal and sort of, we're in agreement on what those priorities should be. And then, we would sort of have a preliminary forecast on how that free cash is going to get used, right? And then we finalize the targets for the stabilization funds and the reserve accounts, finalize priorities and uses of free cash, and then look at the capital budget recommendations of the capital budget committee. They've already started meeting. The expectation is they would complete their work by the time we get to those reviews. And then we finalize our recommendations around capital budgets. Any questions on that part? I think that's fairly straightforward. This part, the next part is the operating budget. And I think that what we're trying to accomplish here is moving things forward so that we're not in a situation where the first budget we get in January or February is $2 million out of balance. And, our mission is to get a balanced budget before town meeting that's within the Prop 2.5 framework. And so that's sort of the approach that we've taken here, is to try to get everybody working together to do that for the first pass. And again, it's reviewing a forecast of what we've done is we've separated out the part of the budget that is common between departments on a cost basis and then the revenue side. And those two amounts, we're going to look at forecasts of what those amounts are. They took a first pass at that. They sent that to everybody. Should have a copy of that. And we'll identify budgets and assumptions that we need to follow up on from that first pass. And then the expectations of what that preliminary forecast would be, we communicate to the school department and town departments. And this is a preliminary budget forecast, so after that October meeting. We then continue our in-depth review of these revenue and fixed costs, continue to refine what the amounts are. And then the goal would be by the end of November, we would communicate to the school and the town department what our expectations are for an operating budget target that's within the Prop 2.5 framework. And that is, so you'll see it later on what that looks like. But there's a sharing ratio that's historically going back over 10 years now, pretty accurate, of a 75-25 split between the school and the town. And then we ask them to come back and identify any unmet budget requests. So if they can't stay within those targets, let us know. Look at potential alternative funding sources and any resulting impact to services or personnel. So basically, that's what we would do there. Then the last piece of this would be if we can't get to a balanced budget within the 2.5 framework. We would know that sooner rather than 2 weeks before town meeting. And if there is a request, we look at that alternative budget, make a recommendation to town meeting on that override. We need the first budget anyway. We need the within Prop 2.5 in case the override doesn't pass, right? So this is just I'm not saying that this is what's gonna happen this year. I'm not saying that, but it's just a process to, at some point, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the future, we probably will have an override at some point, an operating override, but this at least gets us into a discipline of, you know, having something balanced up front, looking at if we needed override, what that would be. And then,
Just on that one point, because I think it's important for those who have been on the committee and have been through the budget process, and for the new folks, because some of, as Steve goes through it, it sounds like, oh yeah, that's how you do a budget, but in the past, it wasn't how you did a budget. So what we would get, and then you have experience on this, those who are repeating, is we would start the year with a budget which was above what our revenue sources were. And so I think, you know, the changes that are being reflected in this are to put the thing back in the right order, saying we have constraints on revenue, and this is what we come from, and here's a realistic target based upon the knowns and the risks involved, and giving that to the departments, giving that to the schools is a more accurate starting point, I think, and helps put some discipline in place. So,
and I think the other important point is that, you know, it puts, you know, the responsibility was always there, but it lets the department heads, whether it's Jeff or Christine, you know, it gives them some guidelines so that when they go through their detail, they know, well, I can save money here, but I have more cost over here. And so they can sort of balance all those priorities before it comes to us. You know what I'm saying? And try to work that out within their departments, their broader groups, I guess. And so, and then this is just a swim lane chart.
One more thing to say, the only thing I would say to that is when the schools and the towns come in with their level service budget,
Yeah,
that, you know, that's level service, today's goods and services at tomorrow's prices. What that doesn't include are any new initiatives, and that's something we can't lose sight of.
Right.
Well,
right.
but just, I just wanted to make.
Yeah, that's what I,
That will put you over that target of 2.5,
Right.
more often than not.
right.
So that's what we still have to have those discussions, because that conceivably could be an override.
Right,
That-
exactly,
that-
yes. Yeah, those new initiatives, if they can't solve it,
Right.
within, you know, like, not to use the school as an example, but let's say they want to do a new initiative and they've looked at additional fees or
Mhm.
related to whatever, and they still can't get enough to cover that new initiative within the guidelines, then they would come forward and say, look, we
Right.
really want to do this.
Right.
It's gonna take an override and make the case, right?
Right.
I mean, if it's not a new initiative, and if it's just level services and they can't stay within that, then these are the implications. We have to lay off this many people, or, you know, cut back here, whatever.
Right, goes
So-
both ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, this is just a swim lane chart that just shows each area, you know, what the town's doing, when they're doing it. We're in yellow here, so, you know, this is kind of just summarizes some of the things I just went through, but basically, you know, late December, January, we're looking at all departments and stuff like that. The select board is on here to, you know, to sign off on stuff, as well as the school committee, and the capital budget committee. This is the the first draft, okay? So, of the operating forecast, budget forecast, so. The town, Christine and Frank, have been working on this for quite a while, the last couple of months. And, all the departments have given them some preliminary input. This is just the first pass, so this could change. It probably will change, but, at a high level, you can see that the property tax revenue, is going up by 3%. That includes some new growth. And Frank, I might ask you to kind of take us through some of the key assumptions in your forecast memo. But basically, the state revenue number is forecasted to increase 1.6. That's against last year's budget. The actual number came in higher than the budget, so the increase over last year is really 1%. And local receipts, there's a big increase there, and Frank will explain that. And then on the town and school employee benefits, there's some assumptions there that they're, one of the big assumptions is there is a effort to redesign the healthcare plan that's been kicked off, if you remember from last year. And so they have kicked that off. The assumption is that they are successful in a redesign that's built into this forecast. So if it doesn't happen, then obviously the cost will go up. And then, yeah.
Does that have to be collectively bargained with everyone?
The Board of Selectmen, the Select Board just adopted section 19. So we will start a formal process of bargaining, with the Employees Insurance Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that 4.5% increase there is assuming they come to an agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some assumptions in there that Frank will go through. And, so really this comes down to $2.2 million of additional revenue. That's about 4% increase that they're forecasting. And what we do is, you can just see, we just split that 75-25 between the school department and the town, which was actually that was the breakdown in last year's budget. And if you go back, if you go back in time, it's very close to that sharing arrangement. And so, the theory is we've shared this with the school department. So they basically have 4% and the town's at 4.13. That's just because of the way the math works on a lower base for the town, they get a higher percentage. So a slightly higher percentage, but so the theory is that we would sort of, continue to dive into these budgets and look to make sure we're comfortable with the assumptions. And that by the end of November, we finalize what is the guidance to the two groups. But at least now they kind of have a working number to sort of start with, knowing that it could change.
So the school will have a number. This is what we project. This is what we envision. We'll have a number for the town, but will we in November be breaking it down? This much for the library, this much for the police, this much for this, or will we be just giving
at this point
number?
at this point, it's high level, sort of at this split level. And then Jeff and Christine will have, they will have this, the say on sort of what are the priorities within their respective groups? How do they want to, allocate this revenue? Where can they save money? So they will think through all that and go through it and come to us with a detailed budget based on those priorities that fits within these big overall arching guidelines. So,
and is it? I feel like everything's coming out of my mouth to sound contentious, which is very. Is it your expectation that everyone will just? So this much for the town, And Christine will say, okay, I envision this much for Park and Rec. I picked that out of thin air. Park and Rec comes back to Christine and says, no, we really need that number plus some X,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And Christine says, well, yeah, they really got a good point. I mean, again, this is all hypothetical. So the budget that comes back to us may be higher. Are we envisioning that, or are we expecting to have Christine to come back at the aggregate number?
We're expecting her to let us know whether she can stay within these guidelines.
Okay,
So
And if she can, great. If she can't, she'll have to explain, why and what the purpose, what the need is and why she needs it. And same for school, so. I mean, but that's the assumption here is that we stay within Prop 2.5.
got it.
That's the assumption.
So, and the way that the number came down is following down, so if revenue numbers vary, plus or minus in terms of as we march towards November. Similarly, the fixed costs, as Steve talked about the healthcare costs, but the number is the number at this
Right.
point, so.
No, the revenue is the
Christine
revenue.
and Jeff both know, and their teams know that those are the numbers. And to your point, if they come back and say, we can't do it within those constraints, then you come back and say, well, the alternative is we can't get the blood from a stone, so okay, is it worth fighting a 2.5% override? And then the conversation go, but you have it in
Yeah.
November as
Right,
opposed
right,
to
when.
on April
Yeah.
20th.
And before we get to that discussion, we want to know that have they explored alternative funding?
Yeah.
Have they looked at, any efficiencies or additional fees or whatever the issues are to try to get to an answer that doesn't require an override. But if we need one, we need one.
Okay, thank you.
So Frank, why don't you take us through, oh, wait, before we do that, hold on a second. So these are the assignments of departments. I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at this, but Brett's been assigned the Public Works Department. Ed will continue as a lead with Emily and myself on the schools. And then Deb, really do sort of the treasurers and town accountants departments. Bob will take the reserve fund, and Jillian, you'll just keep what you did last year. Peter, we've given you the fire and police. Two fairly substantial budgets. And then Mather, given his role on the school building committee, we intentionally keep his workload light. So you have the town building maintenance area that you had last year. And then Deb, these are some of the other departments and boards and commissions that are split between Deb and Emily, and they're typically kind of smaller budgets and departments. So the bigger ones in these areas are the library and the IT budgets. Those are the two big ones, but most of these areas are really small. And then as a group, we would look at the revenues, all of the detailed revenue, the local receipts. Brent's got the enterprise offset, which is related to DPW, water and sewer. And then Deb has got some fixed cost here that the town will support you on all this and give you the details. Health insurance, and then the retirement I'll continue to do along with OPEB. Brent will do the capital stabilization and municipal stabilization, given his involvement on that committee. So that's really the assignments. Okay.
Just to comment on that in the past, we've all participated, both of us back in the review. We're gonna try a little bit of a different approach this year insofar as want to make more of a uniform template in terms of the review. So the process is in November, contact that department head for which you are assigned, you have your assignment here, and set up a meeting, familiarity meeting, but then it's also going over the budget when it's prepared. That Christine in that case and the team have, and their managers have developed. So what we want to try and do is develop a little bit more of a uniform template so that the review is consistent with the department heads, and also the presentation subsequently. You'll come to the meetings that are set up here in the calendar with your department head, and it gives them a nice opportunity to speak before the warrant committee, see and give us each an opportunity to really see the dedicated people we have and the competence that it is. So for me, it's always been a great meeting. But this year, we're gonna try and be a little bit more uniform, to be more uniform in the process. And so we'll work with Christine and Steve and come back to you with a template that we can comment on, and then we'll all go forward prior to the start in December. That works.
Any questions on that so far? Yeah. Frank, can you take us through some of the key, assumptions that people might want to just be aware of
Sure.
that are in?
Is our revenues okay to start with?
What's that?
Or do you want to start with the revenues?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for fiscal 25, the biggest piece is obviously the property tax levy. It accounts for over 75% of our total operating revenues. About 2.5 dictates how much this amount can grow by. It can typically grow by 2.5% each year, plus any what's called new growth to the property tax levy. This can be anything from someone building a new house or building a new deck, making improvements to their home or their business. So that's another way that we can grow the tax base. So that roughly comes out to $1.6 million in growth from last year's property tax levy. Also included there are debt exclusions, which are basically extra amounts that are, they're not extra, they're approved amounts that the town borrows for that are sort of separately taxed for. So we raise revenue for those debt issuances, but as the bonds retire, the amount that folks are taxed for drops off as well. So it is a revenue source, but it's sort of a reserved revenue source for specific purposes. So it is dropping by $207,000 this year, which means that the associated debt that was issued and paid for through debt exclusion is also falling off on the expenditure side. So it's sort of a no net gain or net loss to the town in terms of revenue. State revenue, or excuse me, state aid, Steve touched on briefly. It's a 1.86% increase from last year. The reason it looks a bit high, closer to 2%, is because the 1.86% increase is based on what we budgeted for last year, as opposed to what was actually awarded by the state. Jill brought up earlier that the budget process was a bit, it wasn't delayed, but it was just on a different timeline last year because of the new administration. So we had to sort of use figures that we had, but that's why the 1.86% is there. Local receipts, I can go into a little bit more detail. So it's a almost $540,000 increase. What we benefited from this year was almost actuals. They're almost final. Andrew and his team have been working diligently to get us the actuals for fiscal 23, which is an important year, as it's sort of like the first sort of full post-COVID in terms of economic activity year. We're still obviously recovering, but it was very different from 22, 21, and 20. So the increases there, specifically, I think this is on your packets, but so I won't go through all the items, but $100,000 increase, excuse me, for motor vehicle excise. That sort of tends to go up and down each year, so we're comfortable with the $100,000 increase. The rentals, so we rent various properties, including the post office, the Kingsbury Club, that the town owns and leases to businesses or government entities or whatever the case might be. We have a new antenna that we're hoping to put up on top of one of the water towers. And so that primarily contributes to the $72,000 extra, or not extra, increase that we'll be seeing year over year from 24 to 25. Other departmental revenue, an increase of almost $180,000. That is primarily driven by fiscal 25 having a transfer station sticker renewal year within it. So that one sort of goes every other year, but in 25, so I believe it'll be May and June of calendar year 2025. We'll see the sticker revenue coming in, so that contributes to the 180,000. Licenses and permits, 109,000. Again, fiscal 23 really influenced the forecast here, so that's just basically the increase in activity that we would expect for construction and again, home or business improvements that people are doing. One item that we are projecting to go down is special assessments, which are primarily sewer betterments and assessment, or excuse me, sewer betterments that were assessed to individual homeowners that have since been paid off, so we won't recognize that as a revenue stream anymore. And then, while it sounds a little quirky, the town actually does include what's called investment income in our local receipts. We aren't trading bonds or we aren't trading stocks or crypto or anything like that. It's primarily interest that we earn on our bank accounts. And, you know, we do have a lot of money in those accounts as we're collecting all of the property tax revenue. And so those fixed interest rates have obviously grown or risen over the past few years, obviously. And so the interest rates that we're earning on those accounts on the general fund has increased. So we're projecting 660,000 for fiscal 25 as opposed to 500,000 in fiscal 24. And that is a summary of the 540,000 for local receipts. I know that was a lot, so I can also just pause here and see if there's any questions.
There was a spreadsheet that was also sent out to local receipts that you might that has all these detailed numbers on it if you wanted to look at that. But again, we'll dive into a lot of this, you know, at the next meeting.
So the budget, I'm just surprised the investment income isn't higher. Rates earlier today, but are you going conservative on this?
Well, so we try to be conservative but realistic on all of the different revenue categories, as well as the expenditures, but most especially the revenue categories. The landscape on this one is shifting a bit, and we're waiting for a little bit more information. Our treasurer, Georgia, has been trying to get a better handle on some regulations that are coming down on how accounts are insured. So I believe it's called, or you probably know about this, the diff.
Yeah.
So that is ending, which is going to require us to restructure some of the ways that our accounts are managed, or to collateralize all of those accounts, or for us to purchase insurance that will go over and above the FDIC insurance. Mm-hmm. So there's some guidance that we're still waiting for. I believe Georgia's expectation is that everything will be finalized by February of March of 2024. So still a few months out. But I know she's working a lot with her colleagues and with I believe the state, as I think she was at a meeting with the state earlier last week, meeting about this topic. So we're hopeful that we'll have some more information soon.
Yeah, and that sort of caught my eye too, was given the actual,
Right,
it's so high in 23.
Right.
But what was explained to me is that that includes some of the proceeds from the water treatment plant.
That too, yeah.
okay.
So,
So the principal is not.
yeah, so the average balance should be less that they earn interest on. But,
Sorry, I've left that part out.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's how I was like, oh, okay, really conservative on that.
But I think there's a chance that's one of these, pointed items that might change between now and when we finalize all this. Go ahead.
No, that was local receipts. So for the other available general funds, this is primarily two balances. Of that balance, 652, almost 653,000 comes from two different places. One is the pension trust fund offset. So we take, or I guess in years past, we've appropriated money out of the pension reserve trust fund to offset the assessment that we receive every year from the Norfolk County retirement system to fund our pension system. We would expect those assessments to continue through fiscal 29 and then drop off drastically after 29, fingers crossed. At that point, they expect that the system will be fully funded. But this is the trust fund is money that the town had previously put aside to offset the cost of these assessments. It's been invested, it's grown over time. And so I believe it was last year, Steve, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, that we had the Warrant Committee had sort of put together a look forward of here's what we can reasonably expect our assessments to grow by in the future. And here's how we can sort of spread out the trust funds to offset the cost of the assessments over the course of the next 5 or 6 fiscal years. And still, I think leaving some balance in there built into that calculation in case the system isn't actually fully funded in 29. And in either case, there will still be assessments after the system is fully funded. We'll just be paying sort of the ongoing costs of retirement benefits. So that's $337,920 comes from the pension trust fund offset. And then 315,000 also comes from the ALS revolving fund. So excuse me, we receive revenue from providing those services to residents, or in some cases, I guess, residents in other towns. And that money is collected, and the money is used for capital purposes as well, but it's also used to offset sort of the operational costs of providing that service in Medfield. The other balances that make up that total are relatively small. 15,000 from Cemetery Perpetual Care Trust, again, to offset costs of the cemetery. Some the respite care revolving fund used to offset costs of providing that service on the Saturday program. I believe it's a Saturday program at the Council on Aging. I can go through there's a few others here that are a few $1,000, but those make up the vast majority up in there. And then one other quick thing that is included in that balance is the opioid settlement stabilization funds that we set up last year as part of town meeting. And those are funds that have to be used for specific purposes. So those are sort of accounted for separately, but those are sort of lumped in with that other available general funds as well. Yeah. And the enterprise fund offset. So we have a water enterprise fund and a sewer enterprise fund. Those are two departments that sort of operate separate from the general fund. They collect rate revenue for providing water and sewer services to residents. So that's sort of how they are funded and where they get all their money from. However, they do have some expenses that we quote unquote pay for as a town out of the general fund. So for instance, an employee who works in the sewer department who is going to be, or who is a member of the retirement system, who has health insurance benefits. The town, the general fund, all pays for those benefits, but the enterprise funds reimburse us for those expenses. So those, and there's a whole list of the of those, that list of expenses that we are reimbursed for, that the town's general fund is reimbursed for, that we'll probably cover at a future meeting, but that's what that line item is for the just about $2 million. It tends to stay relatively flat, or it has in the past couple of years. The reason that it's set to drop, at least for the forecast purposes, is because there are some water and sewer debt service payments that are decreasing from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25. So the amount that will need to be reimbursed for making those payments will also decrease.
Well, you guys see, they collect, so, you know, the residents paying their water bill. Will you guys see a decrease because of all the rain we've gotten all summer and
That-
the usage is down?
We should
They have no revenue.
Right.
We should find out within the next few weeks, because the bills will be, we are on an October and an April billing cycle for the water
Oh, right,
department.
okay.
So we'll find out soon.
Hmm.
I think it's fair to say it'll be down.
Right.
Yeah.
Again.
That's the problem, because their costs are primarily fixed.
Right.
So the revenue is variable, the costs are fixed, so that's the dilemma and that points to why they have $1 million retained earnings.
You do have reserves to deal with something. You want to cover the fixed cost, the key, just the key areas?
Sure. So I guess you've already mentioned the health insurance, so I won't get into too.
Well, it might, I think it's probably such a big number, you might want to just educate people on sort of the.
Sure.
I know it's a complicated conversation.
Sure.
To educate people, the more they hear it, I think the better they'll understand it.
Yeah, so aside from health insurance, we have a number of other insurance items that are included in this shared fixed costs insurance benefits category. So we have workers' compensation, property, general liability, and professional, life insurance, and well, I'll stop with those. Aside from life insurance, we're expecting around, we're for the purpose of the forecast, we're projecting a 5% increase across all those insurance types. That's somewhat in line with what we experienced last year, and based on what we're hearing across all insurance types, whatever happened last year may be a good indicator of what's going to happen this year. Police and fire 111F injured on duty insurance is basic, and as I understand it, is basically workers' compensation for our public safety personnel. They have a sort of their special own program that we pay into. The reason that one is decreasing at least in the forecast is because we actually budgeted slightly higher in 24 than what we were actually billed. So I think we're comfortable, at least for now, anticipating that we'll spend a little bit less on that in 25. Life insurance is relatively flat. We're changing carriers, so we don't expect too big of an increase, but a little bit more to come on that. I'll come back to health insurance. Medicare tax is the federal tax that every employer pays to the federal government. We actually over budgeted slightly for this in 24, so we're not expecting a big change for 25. And then the Norfolk County retirement assessment is sort of what I just mentioned too. It's an assessment that is determined annually by the pension system at the county. Ours was actually, we had last year, they changed their actuarial analysis. I'm not even sure what the right technical term is. I'm looking at you, Steve, sorry.
They changed some of the actuarial assumptions.
Yes. So they actually had the assessments for all of the participating entities for 2 years out as opposed to 1 year. So we actually had this figure a lot sooner than we usually do. We usually don't get it until December or January, whereas we've had it for like the past year, which is great. So that figure we're very confident in. For the health insurance, we have the 5% projection in there right now. This is anticipating plan design changes that we're hopeful to achieve. I think if we were to have no plan design changes, we would probably see, I think we would have to at least anticipate an increase that we saw last year, if not more. If you remember last year, the active employee copay, or excuse me, premiums went up 8.7%, which is obviously a cost that the town also has to bear because our portion of the plan premiums go up. So the 5% right now we view as reasonable. This is all obviously subject to change. But I'm happy to dive into that one any further.
Yeah, I mean, there's in this assumption, there's obviously an assumption that there's some savings, right, from the plan redesign. But there's also an assumption that there's an increase due to 20 more employees opting to take health insurance. Every employee that opts, it's like an $18,000 cost to the town. And there's some young teachers that are turning 26 that bringing that number up. So that's there's positives and negatives that are adding up to about 5% assumption. The big assumption of is that the plan design happens.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Has school in it too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, these are
I think sometimes think about them separately, but.
Yeah, these are common expenses that the town has sort of grouped together that benefit all employees, school and the town. They're all in one big pool, which is why we're dealing with them upfront in the budget. So.
And Frank, I thought you worked for Christine, but
I do.
you still manage some budget things for.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah.
So the way the town finance technically falls under Christine, but they have the expertise to do this type of work and pull all the budgeting stuff together. And the school department has their own finance team. But these common type expenses are typically, handled by the town finance. Somebody has to own it. We don't need two people looking at it.
Got it. Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
And I think we really do, personally, I can say, I think we have a great relationship with Dr. Marston and Michael upstairs. I mean, I talk to Michael every day, so we like to be on the same page on a lot of this different stuff as well. Anything on those insurances or the retirement assessment? Okay, debt service. We talked about a little bit already, fairly cut and dry. That lease purchase finance payment is a set payment that we have for 10 years on one of the fire engines. And that I think drops off in fiscal, I want to say it's fiscal 30. So we'll see that one for a while.
And for the new folks here, it's important for me at least to mention that's reflective of how the town and the finances have progressed, because we have the capital budget committee now and the capital budget. And one of the requirements you'll find out as you work with the departments is 5-year projection. Capital, which was not the case 3 or 4 years ago, and as a result, we had the need for a fire truck without the funds for which to purchase it. The solution was a capital lease through the operating company.
Okay.
So where that comes from and why it's a hope. Well, it is not a one. We actually bought some police cruisers in the same method. So
I think last year or 2 years before was the
Yeah,
last year.
sure.
Yeah.
well,
So the expenditure is not requiring appropriation. These are all, I think we've talked through these ones also as sort of fixed and shared costs. State aid offsets and state assessments. The state gives us aid, but they also take a little money back right off the top of that. Well, actually, I guess they don't take it off the top. I think we have to pay. But the reason that the state assessments are dropping off so much this year is because of actually fiscal 25 is the last payment of the last payment that we make to the state for the state hospital campus purchase. And in the last year of the payments, it's cut in half. So that contributes to the sort of the steep decrease in the state assessments there. And then overlay is a reserve that the Board of Assessors uses to pay for things like if someone appeals their tax bill and they end up getting money back, they use that money to sort of offset that cost. And so that's a fixed cost. The last one on here is the vocational school assessment. Yeah, of course.
On the overlay. Aren't there years when nobody's successful and the money isn't used?
I think it tends to vary year to year. Last year, I think we used about 100,000 of it, but the year prior, I think they had to come back for more money. I wasn't here, so I have to confirm, but I'll follow up on that.
But it's not a big deal.
Usually
Yeah.
it's carried forward
Yeah.
because it's like a reserve.
Yeah.
So it is a balance that is carried forward.
Okay. And then the vocational school assessment is for the Tri-County schools. We should have this a more solid figure in, I want to say, the December timeframe. And just, I think I included this in the write-up as well, but just to clarify, this operating assessment that we pay for, or that we pay to Tri-County every year, and which is based on the head count that we serve, the number of students that Medfield sends to Tri-County, is separate from any assessment that we'd be assigned for the potential new project or new school project. So even if that project were to be approved and if it were to move forward, we'd have a separate capital assessment for that. And if that is approved, we wouldn't expect to see that until I think fiscal 27 or so. So that's a few years down. The election for that is in October 24th. So we'll have more information after that. And so that's the list of shared fixed costs that we just subtracted from the revenue forecast.
Has the enrollment to Tri-County been steady year over year? Has it gone up or down?
I think it dropped by one student last year from 7. Yeah. I think this year it might be 6.
6
Yeah.
people this year.
Yeah.
It doesn't change too much.
So our vote in October is not going to have much varying from the up or down.
But even the projections on what that assessment would be in fiscal 27, if I remember, they were fairly small.
They
Based on.
I think they were around 75,000, but I can confirm that. They just presented it.
It's something we should be able to deal with in the operating budget, yeah. So that's sort of, this first pass at the forecast. This was a proposed change in our budget process that we just walked through. So I'm interested in what people think about it. And do you think is an improvement, is it better? What are your thoughts on this? Anybody?
I think it's good. I mean, I've done it both ways. This is a better process because you will get to the number a little bit faster and the schools of the town will know what their delta is in December. And they'll start thinking about it. How do I solve the problem? But wouldn't it be nice if, I came in under my allocation, I got extra money.
Yes, that's always an option, right?
Therein lies the issue. That's when politics start to enter in some places. But so it's a better process because we'll understand the issues sooner and and we'll have to deal with them. The schools and the towns will have to understand, this is how I'm gonna resolve this if we go to an override.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine. And then you look at that initial allocation of 4% for the schools, and last year they came in at 4.2. So. It's,
And I think to that point,
I think it'll be fine.
yeah, and I think that you know, said, this is my 6th year, and over the course of the first 5, one of the real progress pieces has been the work between the town and the schools. And I give you a lot of credit for that, because your expertise in that has really helped in us understanding the transparency. But I think from a practical perspective, asking the schools, for example, to give us a budget, and then you have to dial it back to the reality of the revenue available. This is the way to start, from my perspective, to be able to say, okay, these are the revenue sources, these are the fixed costs, this is the pool that we have available, and here's the allocation. And you don't, you know, again, I look back like 5 years ago, and it's like, well, it's not the Warrant Committee to tell us what to spend, and no, it's not, but it's the Warrant Committee's opportunity to tell you, this is the revenue we have.
Yeah.
We're not telling you what to spend, we're just telling you, this is what's in the bucket. And, you know, and I think that's a very positive way to approach the budget.
Now, just for the new folks on the committee, there are some differences between the budgets between the schools and the rest of the town. The school department maintains autonomy, line item autonomy for their budget. We only, in the town meeting, can only have a say on the amount of the total budget. But how that is sort of, that's they maintain that authority. So, this approach, I think, is consistent with sort of that, you know, those constraints that we operate under. Whereas the town votes on each individual line item for Christine's budgets. It's just one line item for the school.
Gotta change that, Christine.
I'm working on it. Alright.
Is that just the historical
It's,
thing of the town?
Law.
I think it's state
That's
law.
state law.
Yeah.
They have better lobbyists than I do.
It's sort of.
Right. Well, you guys have an idea of, well, we're in fiscal year 2024. So, it started July.
Mhm.
So by end of January, will you guys have an idea of any budget to actual expenses that are totally out of whack at that point, or?
I hope that we would know.
Yeah, we monitor it on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hope you know now, right?
Maybe-
Yeah, well, I hope we know a little sooner.
January or into February, we're getting a final. I don't know if there's gonna be any big things, hopefully. nothing.
I've been going back
Oh, I think-
in my head about whether to ask this question. If the redesign of the health plan, health insurance policies doesn't come through, how much would health insurance go up?
You don't have to give them a hard number.
Okay.
Without-
Have it arranged. That's like-
I would say low double digits percentages.
Yeah. We have an initial meeting with our health insurance company, usually around this time, and they give us that range. We had kind of an off the record conversation with them, and it was fairly close to what we were calculating for last year, which is just not sustainable for the employees or the town.
What, you're in contract with them? With health insurance, is it like a 3-year?
No, we don't have a contract.
Oh, no.
We just-
Okay, I don't know, yeah.
Christine, correct me if my memory is correct, last year, it wasn't the same plan that you're talking about now, but you had some kind of plan where you wanted to change the way health insurance was funded, and all the unions had to sign off and one did not. And that was enough to put the kibosh on it.
Yes, they all had to be in agreement. There were actually, I believe, there were 4 individual unions that would not sign off on the reduction. We had proposed what we thought was a minor plan design change that would have brought that 8.7% increase down to 2.7. And we were not able to get every union to agree to that change. So we did institute the 8.7% increase.
So if, heaven forbid, are we in the same position this year where all the unions together have to sign off on this?
No, we're gonna follow a different process this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments on? Thank you, Frank. We'll be diving, so I think what would be helpful for, at least for our next meeting, is to have the, that's the one we're gonna focus on free cash, and stabilization fund, so having sort of that analysis of, where did we end, what free cash got generated in FY 23, and how does that look back, by the major, the breakdown of what made up that free cash.
Okay.
Revenue and expenses.
Sure.
And then, the stabilization fund, analysis of what we have in all the accounts. So
Okay.
that would be helpful.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item is to talk about this memo that I sent around on the school building project. And this by way of background, this, if you remember about a year ago, actually now, I gave a presentation to this committee, maybe it was October last year, of some high level order of magnitude financial modeling that I had done on a new school building project. And at that time, the thought was, well, gee, when the school building committee gets together, why don't you share this with them? And Mather, invited me over. So I updated that presentation to sort of, add a little more, analysis and discussion. And one of the things that came out of that meeting from some of the school building committee members was a concern over, what is the message was that this is gonna cost more, right? And so, the message,
And this is the preliminary work to get the plans together. Right?
Project.
This isn't.
this is the actual building itself.
This is the actual.
Right, the building itself, yeah. We know there's cost to study it again. And the town is, the town passed, they've had $250,000 amounts that have been passed the last two town meetings, so there's $500,000 there. They're gonna need $1 million, so there'll probably be another ask for that amount. But this is the actual cost of the project itself. If you remember, this is the yeah. So I stop sharing and then do it again.
Oh, yeah.
And then go to share again. You could do my public screen.
No,
So this was what was presented back in April to the school building committee. And a lot of this was just sort of educating them on sort of costs, what's involved in a school project, right? And what are the things that they needed to focus on and agree on goals and priorities, and these are sort of the major categories. enrollment, educational program, and the space needs. And then, some questions that, you know, the school building committee will have to wrestle with was design enrollment, grade configuration, educational program related space needs, and what is the acceptable tax impact for residents. And then the last one there is the source of project funding. And that's the one that, you know, was sort of the subject of my memo. We'll get to that in a minute, but basically this was just educating them on, these are the variables that go into the cost of a new school. The yellow ones are the ones we don't control. All the other blue ones, we have some say or their decision, or we have some input over. But basically the borrowing environment and construction costs are the two uncontrollable variables. And then, you know, there was some information on enrollment that I wasn't planning on going through, but basically these are, you know, there's some projections on enrollment. There was some analysis I had done on, based on some planned enrollments, what's in the general classroom student policy, what's an average number of general classrooms, right, for the various enrollments strategies. And so, you know, when you round those up, you can't have a fraction of a classroom. So, you know, these are the space requirements for general classrooms that based on a 900 square foot, you know, assumption. And so this is just taking people through the, you know, this was the 2021 proposal. This is what was presented by Wheelock for the Wheelock proposal. They had core general classrooms over on the right side there, the 23,426. They had some STEM and breakout rooms also in there. But the core classroom space was 23,000. And then, you know, all I did is I took some of those square foot assumptions that were in that Wheelock proposal and adjusted them for some difference in gym space and reduction in the general classrooms based on enrollment reductions under these different enrollment scenarios. And you can see I had a caveat here that said this assumes that the net floor space in the Wheelock proposal, except for gym and general classroom, remains the same. Most other areas were close to MSBA guidelines. So, but the school building committee needs to look at these other areas just to decide if it's the right amount of space for the educational program, like the special education, that's a big one, and, you know, dining and food and music and art and all these other things that are part of the educational program today. So anyway, at the time I modeled, I looked at construction costs. I modeled both a 700 and an 800. And that was based on the MSBA, as you can see where some of their costs were headed. You know, since then, I've concluded that we probably shouldn't be talking about 700, probably should be talking more about 800 based on some recent, you know, projects that have recently come in. And then these are some of the ones that this was back in April, it was 700 to 800. You know, in my memo, I limited the 700 and just stuck with the 800 because it's and I can show you the MSBA projects they're closer to that 800 number now. This was just the modeling of the cost. Again, this is high level order of magnitude. These are not precise at all, but the different enrollments, the 700 and 800 and an assumption on MSBA. This assumes a 432 square foot reimbursement rate from the MSBA, which they just changed, you know, I think about a year ago. But basically that is, that's the new reimbursement rate. So that's
Did you say 242?
432. It was 360 when we did the Wheelock proposal. And they increased it to 432. So anyway, we modeled all that out with different interest rate scenarios, and this was sort of the different costs. This is based on a 839,000 average household assessed value. So, and that's in all of these individual. So if I'm not going to bore you with, but every one of these has a scenario behind it, and it's based on this 839,765 assessed average first year assessed value. And so you can see, there's at least a $200, maybe $300 difference between whether we're in the MSBA program or we're not, between all the different enrollment scenarios. And so that's the background of there was a conversation at the school building committee by a number of members about this question of source of project funding. And knowing how hard it's going to get to get the school built if we're not in the MSBA, what can the town do now to sort of look at that issue, right? And even if we get in, it's still, you can see the numbers are still going to be more than what we had last time. And these are all based on an assumption that we do new construction. I intentionally did not look at, I didn't look at ad reno, because there's only a few projects in the last couple of years, and they're widely, actually I can show you
Feel committed to this 2 years per school plan that we have now?
That's the question for the school committee.
I was just curious,
Yeah.
there's redundant staff, it's better for the kids to stay in one place, I just wondered if there's a way to.
Dr. Marsden did talk about that once last year and said, if the school was at Wheelock, there was an opportunity in the future, depending on number of students, to combine and have, I think, 1 through 5 all on that campus. And he did talk a little bit about that potential.
I was just curious,
Yeah.
it just seems that there could be potential savings over time that could be.
Yeah,
significant.
yeah.
Again, that's the school building committee.
Yeah, we don't really have a say on that.
I was just
Here
curious,
comes that.
that it never got talked about, being the newbie, I can still ask these questions.
Yeah.
No,
Let me, just show you this real quick. So this is new construction. This is right from the MSBA website. So you can see this little X here is Medfield. That's our fail vote. You can see, where projects have come in. So, these are ever since our failed vote, there's quite a few projects here. But you can see this one's Newton, $792 a square foot. They're all high sevens here. Some of the big ones in Boston are, or the region of the vocational schools are close to 1,000. But, so there's, there are numbers, the trajectory here, you can just see it just going, the wrong way, obviously. This green line, this line down here is the construction funding limit, the 432, that's the part MSBA funds. So, no matter what we do, there's gonna be increased cost and.
Am I correct there? Didn't the MSBA eliminate their emergency repair program to help offset all of these communities that voted yes? So that to offset their increased costs, which is just another
They're
one on our side, because we could have had that and we could have had subsidies
Yeah. Yeah, we
Just that,
but this, yeah, and so this is the Adireno.
I missed that photo.
Gotcha.
That was new construction. This is Adireno, and you can see there's a huge discrepancy between over the last, 3 or 4 years here between some of these schools, so they're like high schools that are at 450 and some are up above 700. And what you don't know unless you dive into this is, did they just put a addition onto a existing building? Or did they renovate the whole, you don't know until you look at each one. Did they have extra swing space? So that cost is not, it wouldn't be in here. So there's not a big data set. You can see there's a huge variation here. So I intentionally did not try to model it. So, but if somebody else wants to try it, they can certainly go ahead. And I'm not a paid consultant, so. But anyway, so that's.
But you ought to be.
No.
But again, that could come up in the school building committee, maybe we'll look at
Yeah,
that.
school building committee.
That's in their purview, not.
I'm sure they'll take a look at that. So anyway, so that's the background behind, we just, share this, memo here, wherever it is, I think it's. So. All right, so this is, so that's the background behind this memo here. This table here was taken from that presentation. And these are, so the thought process was, well, the ask was, well, geez, by the school building committee was, we really have a tough time getting to a new school. The challenge has just gotten harder. And so what can we do as a town to try to address some of these, challenges? And so, the real thought process here was that the ask, I guess, of our town finance group was to take a look at this issue from the perspective of what type of actions could they take to try to look at additional funding sources. And I had a few ideas that I put in the memo of areas. There are other towns that have created these Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, tax mitigation stabilization funds. So there are other town models that we could look at to see and study to see whether they would work for us. And maybe if we conclude they could, there could be an article put forth by the select board to try to create such a fund. And then when we look at our free cash analysis, we could consider whether there's an ability to propose a transfer of some amount. The theory is that if you start this early, at least in 4 or 5 years, you've built up a balance there. That when you get to bonding the school, you can offset the cost of that debt service and the impact from that debt service with what's in the stabilization fund. In those first 3 years, because it's really the first 3 years where the tax impact is the greatest. So trying to be a little proactive and try to plan for that and do it now, because time is on our side. We would help. The other source of, so my ask was, let's see if you can come up with 4 or 5 million between all these ideas. And 4 or 5 million was a number I chose only because it happens to be the first amount of debt service, in my modeling in that first year, it was 4 or 5 million of debt service. So if we could spread that out over 3 years, that would be, that would be a significant, not, you're not gonna save $1,000, but maybe it's a couple $100 off the tax bill in 3 years, something like that. I don't know, they'd have to model that and run the numbers, but. And then the other sources are, there is, we have proceeds from the sale of town-owned land, and that, there's a number of different sources there. When they do sell land, it gets held, if you remember from last town meeting, it gets held in a separate account called land proceeds. And it can only be used for capital items greater than 5-year useful life. So that satisfies that requirement. But it has to stay in there. You can't move it into a stabilization fund. And the so we have the Hinckley, there's 450,000 left over in that unappropriated land proceed account. There's we're hopefully going to sell the state hospital land to Trinity, and there's some proceeds that will come from that. And then so studying that and the amount, and then as we know, there's other parcels of land in town, including the Arboretum up there, that we didn't sell to Trinity, that we hung on to. So there's other things that, could generate sales proceeds. And then the last item is the $1 million payment that Trinity put into their agreement, in the closing agreement, that gets paid when they do close on the state hospital. And it's made to the school department, but it's subject to town meeting approval on its use. So those are the 3 broad categories of funding that I thought that, this I did put in there, a 2028, 2029 timeframe, but that I did get some feedback from Mike Weber. He thought it might be a little earlier than that, maybe a year or 2 earlier, but whatever. I don't think that makes a big difference in the analysis, but so I think that there's at least 4 years, I think, where we could sort of start to put money away in one of these funds, and then earmark these other land proceeds sales for school projects.
Is there any other debt coming off in those years that we can look at?
Yeah, all our debt continues to pay down, unless we take on new debt. So I think.
I know we looked at it in the past.
Yeah, we have a debt schedule. I don't have it in front of me, but there's.
That's just the savings
Yeah,
on the operating side. You can't take that savings, it's not dollars you can put into a fund.
yeah. And the beauty of this approach was that it doesn't, we're using free cash and land sale proceeds, so we're not burdening the town with additional taxes. And matter of fact, we're trying to plan for tax relief. When the thing is, So now I should share with you, there's some comments. Well, before I do that, is there any questions on what I just covered?
It's appropriate, smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's
a lot of work.
Yeah.
Very much.
I think it's the right thing to do in the broad scale of looking down the road at the knowns and seeing what that is and determining and to your credit of looking at options. So that, yes, we can anticipate a significant tax increase. People know about that, and it causes issues, of course. But I think the other piece is that we know about other funding opportunities, and we should walk into that with the vision or a thought as to how that should be used. And because, the counter to that is, well, maybe land sale, let's use it now, or, and we need to educate, I think the best use of it is to educate ourselves and then educate the town.
Yeah.
To see the future of it's projected to be.
And I should share with you, I did get I did get some comments from Mike. I think I sent these around to you as well. So you saw those. You know, I think he's in general agreement, you know, with the approach, obviously. He made a minor comment on the date, the 1 year difference on the date, but, he also just, you know, I think raised an issue that has been raised by somebody else on the SPC, and that is that, maybe we should think about doing more than just allocating free cash and land sale proceeds. You know, I think, you know, some of this is, you know, the feeling is that it's nice to do, but is it enough? And maybe we should, you know, I think it comes from the perspective of maybe some of the people who are younger that have been in town for a long time, that have not been in town for a long time, and saying, well, this problem has been around for a long time. Why haven't we done something about it? And maybe we should be paying more taxes to deal with that. I'm not suggesting that.
No, yeah, I was, you know,
But that, I think, is sort of his point, was that, you know, maybe that rather than just this approach, we should actually increase taxes to pay for this big increase that's gonna come. And so, you know,
So the proposal, as you understand it, is. Have they actually said that?
no, this is just his personal,
Right,
reaction to it.
okay,
To it. I think that's not a SBC position.
okay.
You know, and then I think the other point he raised is that, the way that you know, we have a financial policy that has a debt that does not have, a financial policy that does not address, debt management. And the select board has a goal or a policy in one of their goals that limits debt to a certain amount, which is basically the operating budget minus existing debt. So basically saying you can't have more debt than the difference between what you already have and your operating budget. And, you know, if you literally applied that to the last project, you know, if that was the standard, it wouldn't meet it. So, he raised that as a problem. And it is a disconnect between, I think, we haven't studied it and we don't have a position on it. My personal view is that, based on what I see at other towns, is that there's a little more nuanced approach to that debt management policy. It's more of a percentage of the debt service as a percentage of revenue, you know, so that, because as we all know, the cost of debt can be very different from 2 years ago to today. So it's really the debt service, not the absolute dollar amount of debt. It's the cost to taxpayers of that debt. And that's why, you know, I think it's probably better to look at it that way.
Right.
So he raised that point. And so that, I think, is, I did get, you know, I think you heard from Gus, he was positive about it. I did get, I haven't shared it with everybody because I just got it today, but I did get some comments from Chris. And I'll send those around. And I think, I have quickly looked at them, and I think, you know, there's one suggestion to maybe add a footnote to my memo, which I don't totally agree on your suggested wording, but I understand your point, so I think I probably will make a suggested footnote edit to this. And then I think I'm happy to sit down and go through some of these with you later, because I think we may just disagree on some of them, or maybe have a misunderstanding on how they're applied, but I'll send this around to everybody. And then I heard from, I think those are the, I did send this memo around to the school committee, to the school building committee, and to the select board. So they have this. Are people you think this is a good approach? What type of feedback should we give to in our team or what's the?
Yes, a good approach.
Okay.
In my opinion.
I think it's a very good approach, but I have a question, which is free cash ever used? And this should be addressed to Christine or somebody else. Like if there's an emergency expenditure, a police car bursts into flames and we need to replace a police car spur of the moment. Is that the kind of thing we reach into free cash for? I suppose there'd be insurance for that if that happens. So that's probably a bad example, but you know, something comes up that you weren't anticipating.
So there's a balance that we leave in a free cash account that doesn't, that according to our policy needs to stay there, right? And something like that, but there is a, before you get to that, there's an operating reserve that Christine controls, like a couple $100,000 for unanticipated things.
Okay,
And then if we needed to, you know, there's that free cash balance, and then on top of that, there's the general stabilization fund,
right.
which people want really to use for like a bad recession or downturn, or like a COVID situation or something like that, so we don't have to lay people off or something. So those are the different you want to add to that, did I get it right or wrong?
Just to, so we wouldn't be able to spend it without an appropriation from free cash, but just as a reminder, once we appropriate at that annual town meeting, free cash goes away and you no longer have access to it until it's certified again. So while we do maintain a balance of that free cash, you cannot touch it until it's been certified again. You would need another town meeting.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Just a little bit, yeah. It's there, you just can't touch it.
You can't
It's
touch
like
it
the best thing ever.
until the next time meeting. But it's there, I mean, but in a situation like that, they always have the ability to borrow, like, you know, short term.
Yeah, I mean, the reserve account, the insurance, all of those would be.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you got your feedback, I guess. Anybody else want to say anything?
I mean, I think the discussion around the school building committee is that we know this burden is coming. And if, you know, we liken it to saving for a house, for a down payment of a house, you know, we know it's coming. We know it's gonna cost this much. We know that rates are not on our side. What steps can we take now to, as a town, to collectively kind of just save for that down payment? It's kind of what we're thinking. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not speaking, that's not the consensus of the school building committee, that's just
Yeah.
the conversations that are melting around, you know?
Yeah.
And I do think, you know, in both the concept that we know it's coming in the school building committee, the question of the other projects that are brought up here, that within the responsibility of the warrant committee, clearly the current budget, the articles, but I also think this long-term look down the road is an important element of our responsibility as well. So I think that you bring forward and this is, you know, kind of philosophically an important piece for us to recognize that that's one of our responsibilities, is not just the current, but looking forward into the future.
It also, in my opinion, demonstrates to the school and the MSBA that, you know, this town is kind of serious about taking steps to get a school, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, did you want to say something, Christine? No. Yeah,
I was curious, like, has anybody in the school building committee or on the warrant committee talked with someone in another town who has planned for this kind of expense and asked like what they did to kind of get more support, perhaps like this approach or increasing taxes like ahead of time or whatever, like it just seems like this is not a new problem, it's the state, right?
The
Like,
answer is yes. So
Yeah.
we've been touring other schools in other towns and had conversations with that, and yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely dialogue between other groups, for sure.
Have you found that in other towns have raised taxes before the
I don't
school?
know the answer to that. I don't know the
I
answer
would
to
be
that.
surprised.
I think the check, yeah.
But I mean, that's not what we're talking, we're not talking about raising taxes prior, right? We're
Right.
you know,
No,
right,
just
we're just,
Well, one person,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough thing to do for a project that hasn't been approved.
Right, correct, yeah, I not get it.
Right.
And, but Christine, did you want to say?
No, I
something?
just think, to your question, we have been looking at what other towns are doing in this, while we would love to take complete credit for coming up with this, elementary stabilization fund account. There are other towns that have done that when they've had an issue or they've had some pushback about the cost of a project for the exact same reasons that you mentioned, to show people that we know it's coming and we are setting aside money, especially for that first 3 years where that tax impact is so great.
I mean, Hanover was the one that I think, Hingham was the one I looked at. And
Hingham's done it, Concord's done it,
yeah,
Lexington. I
and
think there's
the
probably
Hingham
4 or 5
example
like
was unbelievable. They had like 4 buildings they were trying to build. And their need was like hundreds of millions, and so they were like, 5 years ahead, they started this thing, trying to, get ahead of it. So,
Do they have any good alternate sources of funding or funds?
no, I don't think so.
No.
Part of that problem, see, but we probably remove that.
Yeah, they had serious issues, because they had big overrides too, right? So. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think. Let's see what's next on the agenda here.
Committee updates.
Committee
CPM.
updates,
School
yeah.
building and-
So the school building committee update and capital budget committee update.
So really no school building committee update. I know that we had Medfield Day, just kind of a dialogue with the town. We have a meeting next week, so
Okay.
I have a better update after that meeting.
Are all the survey results out and posted?
Yeah, they're public, posted on the website, on the school building committee website, and they're interesting.
And Brent, anything on the capital budget?
Yeah, on the capital budget committee, it's kind of 2 working meetings and an organizational meeting so far. I don't have a slide, but I can give you some numbers on how much detail you want.
Well, we don't want line items, but.
Just give you the lay of the land as best I understand.
Yeah.
Experts are here in the room, but, so for fiscal year 25, the capital stabilization fund, from which most of these projects draw their funding source, has, $1,329,290. Now, speaking of free cash, that fund gets infusions last couple of years, quite substantial ones from free cash. So keep that in mind. The total number of requests are at $1,438,000, but there's $350,000 of ARPA offset money expected. So the premise would be if all of those requests get funded, the balance at the end of fiscal year 25 would be at 241,000. So that just gives you a sense of where that fund is. And so far, about half of that amount has come formally from department heads. So we've heard from fire, police, parks and rec, and IT. So the biggest single item is sort of the fixed annual $300,000 of overall IT, which mostly is school software and hardware. But there are additional requests as well. Do you want to hear individual items or wait until?
I think we'll wait. Yeah, we can wait. I just wanted to know where you guys are.
Oh, yeah, we're halfway
Have
through.
you, and then my understanding is this year they're gonna sort of prioritize the request into different sort of urgent, whatever the 3 or 4 categories are that there's.
Well, every request is urgent to somebody, but
Okay.
yeah. I think it's true. I think that statement was made by the chair, Mike Marcucci, but I mean, I would get the sense that that thought process has already taken place since most of these projects were anticipated because of the 5-year capital improvement plan. There weren't too many surprises. I think the one place, in my understanding, where there's still some work to be done is understanding a little bit about potentially resurfacing the Metacomet tennis courts. But that's something the dollar amount would be for that. So maybe we'll have a discussion about priority levels a little bit downstream.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it would. My understanding was they were going to at least make an attempt to try to you know, put them in different buckets, like this one's, you know, health and safety related, we gotta deal with it.
Well, I'd say so far it's been fire and police, so those usually feel pretty high on the emergency requests.
Okay,
Isn't there a policy that if a request comes forward that's not in the 5-year plan, there's a certain procedure that has to be followed?
Yes, they have to justify why it has come up in the 5 years, why it was not included in the initial 5-year plan. So we've had a couple of those and some justifications.
So that's the dialogue, Brent, that goes on. If something comes forward that's not in the 5-year plan, that's how it's addressed.
But that's, yeah, I mean, what's such projects other than the open cup, was that one of the ones that?
That was one of the ones that was not.
And we had
originally
quite a long
identified.
discussion about that. That's an $80,000 request that sort of wasn't in the long-term CIP, but most part, I think they were all.
Well, I think it's important to be in that 5-year plan.
all right, and then, oops. What did I do here? Yeah, go back to the. Okay, so. The next item. On the agenda is the discussion of a request by an ask by the select board to study the potential adoption of the Community Preservation Act. And I think it was either, can't remember, it was last week or the week before, the select board met and got a presentation on the open space study that was done. And one of the priority recommendations that came out of that was to adopt the Community Preservation Act. So they had a long discussion about it. And they decided that, geez, maybe the Warrant Committee wants to look at this. So, yeah, I know.
Community what is it?
Oh, the Community Preservation Act. Okay, so I'm gonna let Bob explain it, because he was involved in the last go around of this. The town tried to pass this.
Well, without going back into so Steve mentioned, I actually sent out to you, I don't know if you got the September 14th select board meeting. And that's like the first half hour of that meeting was that discussion, and that kind of tells you the background as to. So we discussed it, and Steve and I discussed it as we put together the agenda, and we want to address the select board's, request, not ignore what they said. I'll give you a Cliff Notes version of what the Community Preservation Act is, and you go on the webpage and learn more about it. But essentially, it's the community funds are raised through a surcharge on the tax levy against real property. Okay, so it's between up to 3%, not to exceed 3%. It's a surcharge on the real on the property tax. And it goes back to 2000. Historically, town of Medfield, I understand it, in 2000 was put forward, and the town voted not to adopt it. The funds, as they are raised, establishes a trust fund that, and then the state provides at variable rates to the communities that elected to participate matching funds. So it varies year to year based upon how many towns are participating, and the money is raised on real estate transactions. Okay, and then the funds that are generated that go into the trust can be used against 4 categories: open space, land and recreation use, historic resources, and community housing. Okay. And you can again go into the detail, but it's for those specific applications, all right? Adoption of the CPA requires 2-step process. Initial approval by town meeting, okay? And as it's a majority vote at the town meeting, and then an approval by the majority at a municipal town election. And then the vote will include the acceptance, what rate would it be between 1% and 3% is generally the number. And then there are a couple of other exemptions that can be included in the vote. The adoption required by the annual town meeting, followed by a vote of the town election, means that the earliest for us would be fiscal year 2026, right? Because our town meeting is after the town election. So our town meeting in May would be entertainment of the article. And if it were to pass, it would then be in the subsequent town election, which is in March of 2025 or fiscal year 2026. So again, that's just a brief overview, and it's not intended to address everything, but that's essentially what it is. It's a surcharge. So and I think it's very important to watch the select board meeting because of the discussion of it's a tax, you know, if it looks like a duck and it flies like a duck, it's a duck. So that seemed to be the conversation, but.
This is probably me being thick or, anyway, you mentioned 1%, 2%, or 3%. Is that 1%, 2%, or 3% of the tax bill? So if your tax bill is 1,000, it's 3% of that? Or is it 1%, 2%, or 3% of the assessed value of the house?
I think it's of the tax bill.
Okay.
No, it's based on the assessed value and you deduct $100,000.
Oh, right.
So there's a reduction of the amount. So for an average house in Medfield at say 800,000, the tax bill would be around $220. We would get $600,000 from that, including a 30% match from the state, which is what it's running at about now.
So anyway, so that's the point, but it's on the assessed value, and there are exemptions, and you know, there are different, again, it's just very much a.
Residential real estate, or is it all?
No, it's real estate, it's on the tax value.
You can exempt commercial if you chose, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, well, we don't have a split tax rate currently, and.
So let me just get jump with that. So the select board said, the request was that the select board appoint, select a committee to study this. And the select board didn't want to form a formal committee, but thought that having interested citizens engage in this would be appropriate. And then they said, and we already have a group to review this, and it's the Warrant Committee. So we've kind of had a conversation and said the town can review some information and have a committee to do this study is appropriate. And for the Warrant Committee will monitor the progress. And if an article is brought forward by citizens or by the select board, then we'll do our deliberation. And in the meantime, we can clean up some of the particulars of the CPA to make ourselves familiar with it. But I think that's the role of the Warrant Committee, is to engage in the deliberation when the article comes forward. As opposed to taking a position on the pros and cons of a CPA, but that goes into the discussion here, right?
Right, I mean, I don't know what other people's views on that, but I certainly, that's generally the consistent role of our committees, and to sort of to not be advocates for certain, initiatives or articles. So, but I do think, having said that, one of the things that in particular Gus raised in the select board meeting was this concept of, and this is just his position, not the other select board members, but his view was he would support something like this as long as there was an underride associated with it. And so, you know, the way he thinks the underride would work is that, whatever we choose to design the CPA as either 1%, 2%, or 3% surcharge, that there would be an underride under in the operating budget, basically equivalent to that. So that I think his view is that, well, that way the taxpayer wouldn't have an increase in their taxes, you know, because we would be having an underride associated with a surcharge. And the challenge with that, we haven't studied this, but I do think that question of what's the financial impact from a fiscal perspective of an underride on the operating budget is something we could look at and study and maybe give them some input on.
So, let me understand, so the underride is an expense on the town
No,
to offset the.
No, it's a
charge to the
reduction, it's a
resident?
reduction of the revenue, so it's the inverse of
So
an override.
it's the opposite of a
It's
property.
the opposite of a 2.5.
So it's basically lowering below,
It's just,
it's a tax relief, basically. It's basically you're lowering the
It's not-
tax.
He's right, it's like that.
You don't need that. you don't need to give that a, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm making an assumption here. You don't need to give that a name like underride, you can just go to town meeting and say, hi, our current tax levy is X per $1,000 of assessed value. Now it's gonna be X minus, you know, $150 or whatever it is, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It makes, given what we've been talking about here last year and even tonight about expenditures coming down the pike. That makes me very nervous. I don't see how you get from here to there, but
Well, that's one of my observations was that it's, from a practical perspective, it's tough to operationalize and make it work in the operating budget because you're basically saying that that surcharge goes into a separate fund.
correct.
As well as the state matching.
It's not like
It
we
doesn't
can
go
use
into
it
the
for
operating.
teacher salary.
I would be curious to know,
And that's
most of
less
the-
revenue or
most
less
of the-
revenue to the town.
well, you might,
Most of the expenses associated with these buckets that
Yes.
you just went through are not in the operating budget today.
that was gonna be my question, is
They're-
can we get a better definition, or maybe we need to research this, but what those 4 categories are, what's the type of spend that
Yes,
communities are
I
typically
think
thinking
that's-
up towards, and
I think that's something that the town's gonna study. And
how
they'll,
do you continue to spend the fund?
they're gonna look at that question of what's the historical, amounts in each of these buckets over time and,
Like,
but I think the point though is that I was gonna make is that it's not currently in the operating budget, so any money you reduce the levy by, you have to cut, in a balanced budget, you have to cut the operating
Right,
budget.
yeah.
So if you take $1 million out of the levy, you gotta cut the operating budget by $1 million.
Right.
Because most of these things are coming from free cash or the capital budget, so. And we have a policy on this committee of not using free cash to balance the operating budget.
Right.
So that's, I think, gonna be I do think we could look at that question and study it and, maybe come back with a recommendation on that piece of it.
Yeah, I think that's what my recommendation is, we monitor the activity of the citizens group that comes together and brings it forward in a normal deliberative fashion. And I think in looking at the broader question that was raised in the select board meeting, like the tax underwriting and underride, it does fit into the other conversations of tax planning. You know, it was like, that's a restructure of our tax. And I think that looking long-term, not even that much long-term, but 2-3 years, what are the implications of that? What are the implications we get from the town in terms of what would it mean to take a number out of revenue and make it, and take it away from the availability of operating costs and putting it into a category like that? So, but the whole question of tax restructuring, the use of funds, I think is in that broad category, this, to me, fits in.
Couldn't you just have a warrant article that says every year we're gonna ask for X amount of dollars to go into this fund?
Well, the thing about it is,
This
this is a little bit aside of this.
Well, the benefit of this is you get the state matching, right?
Oh, the state-
That's
well-
the piece.
Well,
that we don't get
but
to.
whatever, just one little piece of this is, if the towns that select to go into the CPA program, they establish a trust and they establish a committee, okay, of 5 to 9 members. And they go through the requests from each of these categories and make the selection and use that, presenting it as an article to the town. So the committee designates what they recommend to the town
Right.
to use, and then as an article that is required. to be
They will
brought
come to us and then go to town meeting.
Yeah.
So there is.
Yeah, there's a process there, but, so anyway, we weren't planning on, I wasn't planning on spending a lot of time on this because we just learned about this ask. And I think, it's one of the,
Into the board.
yeah, just, I think this is probably something that there's a limited role. We could look at this underwrite question, but I think the town probably could play a better role, pulling all the information together, and then either the select board or citizen could come forward with the pros and cons, and we could sort of evaluate it at that point, so. Does that make sense to people? Yeah. Okay. All right. Where are we on the agenda? Oh, okay. Potential non-financial articles for the 2024 town meeting. So, one of our jobs is to look at all articles that come before town meeting, including non-financial ones. There's been a group put together to look to create some recommendations for a dog bylaw. And so it's reasonable to expect that since that committee was put together by the select board, that they probably would put forward a bylaw for dogs. And so I would mention it because, there's always a need, if you have an interest in any of these topics, to raise your hand and, you can follow it along, and when it comes time, meet with sort of, follow it, study it, and when it comes time to meet with the sponsors to, be more informed than the rest, inform the rest of us as a community. So I know Ed really wants to do it.
I can take the top.
Oh, wow, that.
There you go.
That'd be great.
There you go.
That'd be great.
Perfect.
First meeting, right?
I was thinking the same.
And then there's a question about whether we will have zoning related articles, depending on how some, Christine, do you want to update on the potential for a zoning related article, or is there anything you want to say on that, or, okay. Depends, I guess, on how some things, pursue, how they progress on that, but there's always a chance we might get zoning related articles. So, anything from town finance you want to update us on?
I think we've covered most of it tonight in bits and pieces. I just want to say thank you. We're super excited to kick off the fiscal year 25, even though you're kind of officially kicking it off tonight. Brent started already with the capital budget, and Frank started the day after the fiscal year 24 town meeting. So we're already moving forward on all of this. Just two quick things. We submitted the GFOA budget to the Government Finance Officers Association. We should be hearing back from them shortly. But we will have those GFOA budget documents for you, hopefully in the next couple weeks at your meetings. And then municipal finance is interesting, fascinating to us, but it can also be really quirky, as you know, on a few things. So our door is always open. If you have any questions or need additional information, please don't hesitate to stop by, give us a call, email, whatever you need. We're here to answer any and all questions for you.
And I'll just add that, again, over the 5 years, now 6, the development of the finance communication, its professionalism, transparency that Christine has brought with her department has really been terrific. So I would say that what she just told you is 100%. So if you have those kind of things, if you have questions, her door is always open. Frank has been great in his coming on board, drinking through the fire hose, which shows tremendous knowledge and background. So thanks. And Andrew, if you want to introduce yourself to the folks who aren't here, so.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Foster. I'm the town accountant. So been here a little over the year as a town accountant. I was the assistant for 3 years prior to that.
So when you get those budgets and you see those numbers matching up, here's the man.
Well, thank you for the kind words. We can't move this budget process that I envisioned in 2019 without fantastic warrant committees that buy into this. And we're really excited for this new process. I think it's going to reduce a lot of the angst and stress we have in February and March. We're kind of flipping this process completely on its head. And I think it's going to have some tremendous results for all of us. So.
And I'm sure you'll find opportunities for angst and stress. Just some gaps for us.
For you, not for us.
And the school committee representative?
I'm just here to learn.
Well, but I know that, but I mean, the people who are here, so thank you for
Yeah.
the time.
I'm excited for budget. My first budget.
Yeah. Hopefully this will help in that process.
Very much.
The slide deck presentation was excellent.
That was excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is there anything else? Anybody else has any informational items or anything else that, okay,
Well, I got a motion to adjourn. If there's anything else you're looking for.
in a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.